Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Isabelle.
Good afternoon,
morning,
Benjamin.
Geralyn.
Hello.
So first off, a big thank you, Geralyn, because it's really early for you. It is 6 o'clock in the morning, your time in Texas.
Yes, it is.
So as promised, I wear my my Moody's business to support Geralyn. So I have the T-shirt, even if I didn't attend the school, but to show my support to Geralyn, I'm wearing her school colors. So thank you for the two of you to agree to do this session. Thank you to EFMD for co-sponsoring with Academ by Rima One. For the one of you that don't know me, my name is Benjamin Stevenin. I'm the CEO of Academ, and I have two amazing speakers today. So I will start with Geralyn. Geralyn, could you maybe just introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Geralyn Franklin. I'm the interim dean of the B.I. Moody III College of Business Administration at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. This is a one-year rent-a-dean position, and I'm a retired business dean and decided that I missed deaning so much I needed this one-year experience. But normally I spend my time focusing on consulting related to strategic planning and accreditation with most of my schools outside the U.S. That I've been working with.
Thank you, Geralyn. Isabelle, could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Isabelle Fagnot. I'm Associate Dean Quality and Accreditation at Kedge Business School. I'm also a professor in information systems. I've been working in accreditation for the past 10 years. I've worked with two other schools in the past, and I've been through initial and maintenance accreditation for the Triple Crown schools. I'm also in charge of national accreditations at the school.
Thank you. So maybe just to re-explain the format, we ask all of the attendees to please get involved, ask questions. I'll pass the question to the speakers. So please, if you have a question at any moment, use the chat, use the Q&A, and I will pass those questions to Geralyn and Isabelle. Also, this series of webinar of how to webinar is really to get the opinion of two people that have gone through a lot of different accreditation process. Geralyn as a dean, someone that started accreditation process, that did some review of accreditation process. Something that you did not mention is that you were also on the board of AACSB, so you really have a tremendous experience. Isabelle, you also did initial and reaccreditation in different schools. So having the two of you being able to share today is really nice. So the topic is how to write an accreditation report. So I think the first question is, what is an accreditation report? Geralyn?
So accreditation is about an assessment or certification by an external body, usually against a set of standards or some type of guidelines. An accreditation report thus becomes the actual written document that you use to prove that you have achieved the standards, you have met the standards, you have achieved the certification that's required by the accrediting body. That report is usually the primary basis for an accreditation review, whether it's an initial accreditation or a continuing maintenance or reaccreditation. So the report itself is the document that certifies or shows how you have achieved or are continuing to achieve accreditation.
If I may add to this, I think it's, the accreditation report is also a chance for you to highlight, the major achievements of your school. It's a chance for you to tell your story to a group of accreditors that will come and, review the document and do the audit. So I think it's also a chance for you to really showcase what your school is doing.
So Isabelle, since you said that, what is for you the complexity of writing an accreditation report?
I think it's at different levels. You have, as Geralyn was saying, a set of guidelines, standards defined by the accrediting associations. And so you have to fulfill and meet the requirements of those standards. So that's one complexity, because those are international guidelines very often. So sometimes things that you are not used to measure in your school. The other difficulty I see is that it's by nature, when you do a report, it's a transversal document. It touches all the different offices within the school. So you actually have to report on a lot of different things at the institution level, and you have to engage with a lot of different people. So that can make the writing of the report pretty complex as well.
Geralyn?
Well, I agree with Isabelle. I mean, I think that the complexities of it is that an accreditation report doesn't involve just one person writing a document. It takes a team, and that team is often beyond just the business program. Now, obviously, if you're a standalone business school, that's a situation in itself. But if you're part of a university system like I am, you have to rely on a lot of people for institutional documents and institutional information, enrollment, financial figures and so forth, that maybe you don't have to rely on a day-to-day basis. So it can be very complex in terms of the groups of people that you have to rely on. The other complexity of it, I think, is just the point of trying to decide what you should include in that document, because different organizations have different guidelines or recommendations. So the complexity is deciding what to include and what not to include. And particularly when there's usually page limits and so forth. And the documents are going to vary in any 5 to 10 year period. If you're going through initial accreditation, then there's one way to write the report. If you're going through maintenance of accreditation, there's another way to write the report. And then if the accrediting body makes changes, it may also change as well. So a lot of schools that I've worked with have written an initial report under one set of standards, their first maintenance report under another, and then their second maintenance report is going to be under another. So lots of complexities just keeping up with what are the standards, what are the requirements, and what are the guidelines.
Thank you. Isabelle, do you want to add something on that?
No, well, maybe just with current, the current situation, I think one of the complexity we have nowadays with the COVID-19 crisis, it's adding another layer to the report, because I'm at the moment writing a report, and we are changing a couple of things because we have to take into account what's happening at the moment. And I think, this is the case for a lot of business schools around the world. And I think that also increases the complexity of how to tell your story when there is an uncertainty about what's going to happen within the next 6 to 12 to maybe 18 months.
Thank you. So I understand that there's a lot of people involved, but is there for you guys a best practice in writing an accreditation report? Like, how would you structure it? Do you have a kind of process that you always have in place? Geralyn, do you want maybe to start with that?
Sure. I think there are best practices, and they depend upon the unique situation of the institution and the school or the unit that you're writing the accreditation for. In general, we're working on a continuous improvement review report right now in the Moody College of Business. And what I'm trying to emphasize to my team, and that team includes a broad range of internal and external to the college or the unit in a larger university setting, is that the first step is what I call fact gathering. And basically, we're looking at the requirements or the guidelines for the report from the accrediting body, and what kind of facts do we need to gather? In this case, a lot of it is just summary information. It's a little bit more difficult for me because this is my first year at the institution, so I don't have the previous background. So I need to get a lot of other people involved to gather the facts. The next step after fact gathering is what I refer to as the storytelling. But I can't tell the story until I have the facts and I totally understand them. And when I say I, it's not necessarily me individually, but working with my team to basically gather the facts and then tell the story of the school based upon the facts. And that's a very important, I think, point in terms of making sure that you have the facts, and then you begin to tell your story. And as Isabelle referred to earlier, you tell your story because you talk about the uniqueness and the wonderful things that the school does that help it achieve its strategic plan or its strategies, and ultimately help it achieve accreditation.
Thank you. Isabelle?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's it's also about hearing people tell their story first, because it's going to be a lot of different parts of the school that needs to come together in one document. And you have, one of the things for me is that I haven't been at the school for a long time. I've been at the school for just about a year now. And so I have to get to know people as well. I have to get to know how they work. I have to get to know how they write, how they tell, what they do in their responsibilities. And as Geralyn was saying, you gather facts, in the first stage of the document, because you have those facts. You need to then tell a story with those facts, and then you need to go back and forth with the different offices at the school to make sure that the story is coherent. So it's actually a multi-stages process, because you are going to collect data, you are going to put it together, and then it's going to be a set of back and forth with a draft of how to tell the story, how to make sure that everything reads well and puts the school and the different achievements in the best of light. Something that is also very understandable by the outside world as well.
You mentioned earlier, Isabelle, that you were in a multi-accredited schools. So you have EQUIS, you have ASCSB, you have AMBA, plus national accreditation. Geralyn, your ASCSB, your SACS, you also, in the previous life when you were in the Middle East, had other regional accreditations. So when you think about an accreditation reports, are they all different? Do you have the same process in place of like checking the facts and then applying the facts? Or depending on the accreditation, do you have a complete different set of practice?
Do you want me to take the lead on that one?
Okay,
so I think if you look at the process on a more higher level, I think the process in itself doesn't change much, but what changes a lot is first to understand what the audience will want to see in the report and what language, because depending on the type of accreditation, whether it's international, whether it's national, if it's institutional, if it's an institutional document, which we have, several to write at the school this year, they are all going to talk about strategy, about the financial strategies, about programs, about the portfolio of programs, about everything you do for students, and so on and so forth. But they all have different expectations. They are all going to want to see things put in a different light. So you have a set of raw data in a way with a process, but you have to first understand your audience. I think it's really key to understand what that audience wants and how you should present it. Because you don't want to mix it. It's sometimes not easy because as accreditation, you know, I've worked in accreditation for a number of years now, so I know the different types of requirements. But the people at the school, you know, they will mix up, you know, different requirements. So you have to make sure that you can really set, you know, the requirements, and then you gather the facts, and then you go through multiple stages of writing and rewriting.
And you know, I think it's really important that the main accreditation team, which may be a person who's like the director of accreditation, like Isabelle, or it may be an associate dean, or a smaller group of people, understand the different requirements for the different accreditations. I was in an experience a few years ago where I came in as an interim dean, and my college had a major accreditation and then a couple of program accreditations. And we were in trouble at the time with one of the program accreditations. And the reason is that the unit with the program accreditation had tried to use the college's assurance of learning or assessment information in that accreditation review. But that accrediting body used terms differently. And therefore that accrediting body, you know, didn't understand what the program was sharing. And as a result, when it was finally determined, the accrediting body kind of took the view that, well, you don't care enough about us to use our correct terminology. You're just trying to throw your main accrediting terminology on us. So it was, you know, kind of a difficult discussion. That really wasn't the case at all, because the unit didn't realize the difference between the college accreditation language and their own program accreditation language. So, you know, you have to be very careful about what the instructions are for the accrediting body that you're basically seeking the initial or reaccreditation from, and understanding their guidelines. And someone is going to need to have that general knowledge to lead the direction to, or basically instructions to others about what they need and in what format and what terminology and so forth. And I think these are really the challenges from multi-accreditations. And most schools today don't just have a single accreditation, because there's usually a national country accreditation, and then there may be specialized accreditations, there may be institutional accreditations. So most of us are working under multi-accreditations today, with a few exceptions.
And you're just talking about this accreditation guidelines that are really specific, and saying that at least one person in the institution should be aware of that. But in a lot of institutions, it's more than one person, because if you rely everything on one person, then you have a bottleneck, and then at the end of the day, you might have some problem. So how do you get this knowledge to the people?
Well,
Geralyn?
I think there has to be a training for all concerned in terms of the expectation of the accreditation body. So it doesn't really matter what accreditation body it is, but as you're going through the process, there has to be use of terminology and so forth. And I think in our case, faculty and staff need to know the terminology of the accrediting body. So, you know, in some cases, it's, if you're talking about assurance of learning, that's specific to AACSB. In terms of terminology. Assessment, from our view, is more specific to the Southern Association, or what we call SACS, S-A-C-S, which is an institutional accreditor. So those kind of things to make sure that faculty and staff know that. We do that in terms of faculty and staff meetings, in terms of communicating to appropriate individuals, and also, you know, to my superiors, who are institutional level, who are much more prone to the institutional accreditation than they are to AACSB. So, you know, as I view that as my role as a dean, I have an associate dean who is basically in charge of administration and quality. And in her role, you know, she, of course, is the one who, quote unquote, preaches accreditation and the specific type of accreditation that we're focused on. So it's more than one person. Typically, in my experience, it's been a small 2 to 3 member team that is kind of ultimately responsible, but then that team expands to department heads, program heads, and ultimately faculty and staff and students who are an very important piece of the accreditation process, as well as external stakeholders, business, government, community leaders and so forth. And they all need to be aware of the accreditation and the types of terminology related to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's what you're saying is really spot on. I think it's I would add maybe one thing for for the team of one or two more people that are in charge of accreditation mostly. I think it's important that they attend conferences or seminars. I think it's good to stay up to date with what's going on in the different accreditations. I have, being in France, we have a national task force on quality and accreditations. And I've been part of this group for over 10 years now, and it's been very helpful because we also talk a lot about the different, the different things that we do in our jobs, and it's a very, it's very helpful to discuss with other people, because then you find strategies to then go back to your institution and as you were saying, transfer knowledge, because I think there's a lot of pedagogy involved as well in our jobs. For instance, I know that, when we talk about learning goals, it's important that faculty knows about them, that program directors. It's a constant pedagogy where, things change in programs, things change in accreditation. So we have also to, as you said, spread the knowledge. And I think it's a lot of pedagogy and a lot of keeping up to date with what's going on as well.
I'd like to add one thing. I agree wholly with Isabelle about the training, attending conferences and training related to the accrediting bodies. And I think it's very important that it's more individuals are involved in that than the 2 or 3 people who might have the primary responsibility. The reason is that the 2 or 3 people have primary responsibility for usually writing the report and preparing for the team visit and so forth, but everyone else has a responsibility, or from a team, peer review team expectation, and there's an expectation that other people are going to understand the accreditation more widely. And it's very interesting to me when I've been on peer review teams at institutions where the knowledge was held only among a few. And it's very evident in the first few meetings that everyone else has not been truly involved in the accreditation process. And that's a negative. So I do think it's important that if you're thinking about who needs to go to training, that it's more than just that small team that's in charge of accreditation, that you expand it, to department heads, and maybe select committee chairs, or maybe all committee chairs, because most schools usually have committees, in terms of assurance of learning, faculty management, faculty research, and so forth. So you have committee chairs and additional people to basically grow your knowledge of accreditation, depending upon the accrediting body.
Which will in turn help with, sorry. No, I mean, that will in turn help with writing the report, because then people will understand better what is required of them when you're asking for information.
Maybe just an example, I was talking to a dean of an EQUIS school recently, and they just got EQUIS reaccredited. And the way they had built their process was to ask each chapter to a different person, and then there was someone that kind of like compiled all of the different chapters and put it as one. And the comments of the EQUIS team was to say, look, we had a vision of your school in the report, and then we had the reality when we came to your campus, because a lot of it was missing because the people that were writing didn't have the same scope, didn't see the same things. And so at the end of the day, the storytelling was not there. So it's really important to have this storytelling, and that the people do understand what is the complete overall picture. But we have a question from Amizan, and I think it's I think both of you can answer, so is how to kickstart the process of writing the accreditation report. What to prioritize, gather data prior to writing, or it is a parallel process? Geralyn, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you, Ben. I think in some sense it is a parallel process, but I would say that, you know, you have to gather the data first before you can really get into writing the report. And that would be that you may have different individuals who have expertise or knowledge on the different aspects of what is required in the report, that would write sections in terms of, they would write what they think is appropriate in the fact gathering stage for maybe the issues related to faculty research, or maybe student admissions, or faculty management, or staff management, assurance of learning, you know, how you basically, how your programs are structured and so forth, how you engage with students and so forth. So those individuals, are a variety of individuals, it won't be just one person, would be writing basic information. And that to me is the fact gathering stage, where basically those who have the best knowledge, or small groups of people who have the best knowledge, are putting that information together in a fact gathering format. The telling the story or writing the story that comes next is basically taking that information and putting it in one voice. It's very interesting to see in a report when you can basically see the first section had to have been written by someone, the second section by someone else, the third section by even another person, because it doesn't flow. It's not one voice. So when I talk about fact gathering, lots of people are writing specific direct information that's needed for the report, and then telling your story is usually the wordsmithing and the getting to one voice that, again, multiple people may do, but they're all doing it with the same focus. So I really see it as two parts: an early fact gathering, and then you begin writing the full report or telling the story with the facts that you've gathered.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's important to have an action plan that, you know, kind of really at first shows people, well, yeah, you first have to show people the action plan. I think it's important because people have to understand the different stages in writing the report or in getting the report done, because you know, often people will try to push deadlines. So I think it's, you know, if they think that you have to hand in your report in 6 months from the beginning, they will not understand why you're requiring information from them at the very beginning. So I think it's important to have an action plan that talks about, as Geralyn was saying, the different stages. And some stages may happen in parallel. You know, I think it's, you know, you need to start writing at one point and not have just, you know, you need to start putting the facts together. But I think, you know, having an action plan, starting collecting the data, starting putting the document together, and then, you know, writing the story, telling the story, you know, are different stages that need to be laid out to people as well in an action plan.
Isabelle, Amizan asked another question. I think it could be on your scope as well. Is the question of how to best structure or strategize data gathering to avoid repetitive requests for different accreditation type, EQUIS and ASCSB, that are happening one after another. Mm-hmm.
The way I've done it in some areas, it works in some areas, it doesn't work in other areas, but being a triple accredited school, what I typically do is that I look at the different accreditations. Like if I take internationalization, for instance, which is, you know, a big chapter in, you know, EQUIS. Well, I will make sure that the international office meets all the requirements and above requirements for the international chapter. And then for ACSB or for OMBA that do not have a whole chapter on this, I will make sure that, you know, for ACSB it's addressed because it's part of the mission, you know, that it's directly mission driven. So whatever accreditation has the highest requirements for a topic, I will make sure that the school meets those requirements and above. And then I will draw from what they are doing to tell the story for one or the other accreditation. I hope I'm making sense.
No, it's clear. Geralyn, do you want to add a comment on that question?
I think she answered that very well.
Okay, another question from Simon, and you're up really early. Simon is up really late because he's in Australia. So it seems very difficult to provide evidence that the schools meet all requirements within accreditation standards within the page limit or report. There must be point when the review report prioritizes certain area over other, and or responds to the high level intent of the standards rather than detail. How do you decide where to prioritize in the report?
So I'll take that first. I always encourage in the report writing that we just write the report based upon what people are recommending or thinking. And in doing that, that always means that the initial draft of the report is much longer than it needs to be. But I'm a person that would rather have all the information there and then decide what I want to cut, summarize, put in appendices, you know, after I have all of the information. So that's worked very well for me. I've been doing that at multiple schools over my career as a dean, where I've been through initial and multiple reaccreditations or maintenance of accreditation. I've always used that philosophy to basically gather the facts, write the story, and write the story as you want it to read, and then realize that the accrediting body may not want to hear your detailed story. So once you do that, then you need to look at what the accrediting body's requirements are, or guidelines, and keeping in mind that in many cases they are that, just guidelines, and they give schools the freedom to basically highlight who they are and how you want your story told. Now, I don't see many schools taking that freedom until they've been accredited a while. Isabelle and I discussed this, is that usually until schools have been accredited, have been through a few reaccreditations or maintenance before they start to kind of move away from exactly what the guidelines are from accrediting bodies. You still have to meet the guidelines, but then how you go beyond that is up to you. So I think you have to, you know, look at what's expected in the reports, and then additional information is usually put in the appendices. And then of course with accreditation visits, whether face-to-face or virtual, now that we're in this new era, there are certain things that peer review teams are going to be looking for beyond your accreditation report. And one of the things that I emphasize, or have been emphasizing in the Moody College of Business right now, is that much of our AACSB report will be focused on engagement, innovation, and impact. But we do a lot of things on engagement, innovation, and impact that won't be in the report because you have to summarize and use key points and so forth. I've been on peer review teams, and I know that we're always interested in what has been left out of the report. When we're there face-to-face or in virtual setting, we always ask the faculty and staff and other stakeholders, what key engagement, innovation, and impact activities that you've had over this 5-year period were not included in the report, because you just can't include everything. So I think it's really important that if you have the broader information to begin with, it's easier then to pare it down and then to prepare your internal and external team or external stakeholders for the actual team visits.
Yeah, I agree with you. I may just add one of the things as well is if you, you know, depending on the accreditation, you may have the possibility to work ahead of time with the chair of the visit, or if you have concerns that needs to be addressed in the report. I think it's important that even if you can't talk to the chair, that you talk to the accrediting bodies or someone that can advise you on what is enough information to put in the report, or if you need to do, you know, a major appendix sorry, on this. I think it's also about, you can always also think about maybe having a short summary in your report. If there is something that is not in the guidelines, but that's really crucial to who you are as a school, I think it's important, you know, to include it in the report. You can do a small paragraph or a table that summarizes information, and then people have then the freedom to go and look in the appendices for this as well. But I agree wholly with Geralyn that having a lot of information at first and then narrowing it down makes it easier, and especially in preparing the school for the visit as well. Because one of the things, and as Geralyn said, one of the things is that you will always have, you know, also questions that you know, will be asked outside of the report, because the, you know, the people, the team that is going to come is usually a seasoned team, and they will also want to see what's, you know, what's happening at the school. So I think it's important that you have a whole picture and you are ready to answer all sorts of questions. And I think that comes with having, you know, as broad a range of information as you can for the report and the visit.
Thank you, Isabelle. One question from Amir is, how do you integrate separate requirements and link them together coherently in an accreditation report? We had a lot of questions about, you know, this transversal chapter that there might be in some accreditation like EQUIS, and internationalization might be a chapter, there is others. So how do you make sure that there is this coherent approach toward the whole report?
I can start with that one. I think that comes back to what we were talking about in terms of, you know, the discussions and the overall, you know, pedagogy or communication that you do as an accreditation team or as a school, you know, in terms of accreditation. I think once it is different the way you're going to do it if you're in initial accreditation process or if you're in maintenance. But I think it's very important that a school that is accredited or is going to be accredited, I think it's important that, you know, top management explains why it's important to be, and that everybody can understand what it entails. Because once you're accredited, it changes, you know, the way you think about things that you do as well in the school. I'm not saying that, you know, you need to drive your school, you know, with the guidelines. You need to remain your own school, but you need to make sure also that you are going to be able to answer the standards and the requirements. So I think it's important that you know, people know about the different requirements. You know, EQUIS is about corporate relations, CSR, internationalization. Those are transversal things that are very important. For CSB, it's, you know, impact, innovation, engagement. So we have to think in terms of those terms as well when we go to department meetings, when we talk to faculty, you know, and so on and so forth.
Geralyn, do you want to add something?
I want to add something more to the extent of how do you ensure that you can achieve your accreditations, more so than just weaving things into your accreditation report. You know, I think it's really important for accreditation to be part of the strategies of the school. But beyond that, the school should have strategies or a strategic plan that basically pushes you beyond where you are today. And as a result of achieving that strategic plan or those strategies, you should be able to achieve whatever accreditation that you're interested in, because those strategies should be key in your strategic plan to be able to do that. And in terms of engaging others in the accreditation process, to me, if you will engage them in the strategic planning or the strategies planning process, then you are engaging them in accreditation. So if they know what the strategies of the school are, if they know their roles in achieving those or basically supporting the achievement of those, then I think they can better understand when you come back and talk the specifics of an accreditation and a specific accreditation body. So accreditation is an ends to a means in my mind, in that if you have good strategies or a strategic plan, you follow it, you report it, you engage internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, then at the end of some period, you're going to have to come together and write an accreditation report and have an accreditation visit based upon all the things that you've done over that period of time. So just keep that in mind. That it's beyond, engagement of internal stakeholders, faculty, staff, so forth, is beyond the accreditation effort. It's really an overall strategy effort.
A question linked to that is, how do you get the buy-in from different departments? Some feel that accreditation preparation is additional work, so how do you get them to actually buy into this process of report writing, giving the facts, and all that is linked to it?
Well, I would be upfront that accreditation is additional work because I mean it is, but I mean that's back to the point of, if the unit has decided that accreditation is important, and that decision may have been made by those at the head of the unit, and maybe not, you know, the faculty or the staff in the unit, but someone has made the decision that accreditation is important, and therefore you need buy-in. First of all, if you don't have buy-in, I think you have to discuss with your internal stakeholders why accreditation. Why does accreditation matter? Why is it important that you have a national accreditation? You probably can't operate if you don't have a national accreditation. In the US, if we don't have one of the regional institutional accreditations like SACS or WASC or Middle States or so forth, we can't get financial aid, federal financial aid for our students. So there's reasons that you have accreditations. Why do you have specialized accreditations like AACSB or EQUIS or AMBA or many of the other program accreditations? Well, those are voluntary accreditations. No one is forcing you to have them. You're basically stepping up and saying that I want my business school to be accredited. I want my business school to be Triple Crown accredited. And therefore, you're agreeing to meet the requirements of those accrediting bodies. And you, in turn, have to communicate internally why those accreditations are important for you, for your students, and for other stakeholders. To me, it's a matter of educating your internal stakeholders as well as your external stakeholders of the importance of accreditations.
Yeah, if I could add to that, a couple of things I usually talk about. I try to I try to really show it as a continuous improvement at the school level. And I try to really make people see that a lot of the things that are in the accreditation guidelines or standards are things that can be used as tools for continuous improvement rather than constraints. And for those to be to become tools, they need to be as integrated within the processes at the school. If I take, for instance, intended learning objectives or learning goals and things like that, you know, those, if they are integrated in the program, if they are well integrated, then they become really a tool for the program. And it's less difficult if it's done on a regular basis and it's used as a tool and people see, you know, the importance of it. You know, it's easier to have them do the work. And I find that really a lot of people, you know, sometimes when they hear accreditation, as you say, well, it's extra work, of course, but they're like very afraid and there's resistance, like, oh my God, accreditation, I'm gonna have to do this. It's adding to my, you know, already busy, workload. But I think if you show them that it can actually help them, you know, it helps. At least it, you know, it's worked in you know, in institutions I've worked with, to really show that it can be a tool if it's used well. And I think it's also, speaking of this, it's also important to not create extra work when you don't have to create extra work. And I think, you know, if I go back to learning goals, you know, do something that works with your school. Don't go invent a whole system just for accreditation that's going to come in addition to everything else that you do. It needs to be integrated in your processes, because, you know, that's the way it should be. It should be something that you can use and you know, help you with the program development and continuous improvement overall.
We have a question from Adam, who was with us last week, no, 2 weeks ago, which is, how do you decide who is involved actively in writing the report and who gets the report for passive reading within the institution? And I think we could link that to another question I had for you guys, is like, there is some institution that use external reviewer or external writers to actually write the report. So they give the facts and then the writer write the report for them. So could you maybe just explain your vision on internally who could do it and who should be involved, and your vision on the external part?
Go ahead, Isabelle.
Geralyn, do you want to shoot?
I'm gonna punt to Isabelle.
Well, we talked about one voice. So I think for the overall report, I think it's important that there is one voice, exactly to say, you know, to do what Geralyn, to avoid what Geralyn said, as having, you know, one chapter read this way and then another chapter read another way, and then not have a coherent document. I think it's important that there are different people at the school that you know, read drafts of the report. You know, top management, some people in different boards or department heads that will be talking to auditors when they come for the visit. I think, you know, if you are a school that wants to have some, you know, external views on what you are doing, to have more of, yeah, you know, sometimes having a consultative opinion, you know, that could be also very interesting to put light, you know, in some of the things that you want to present, the way you want to present it to the accrediting bodies. But I think there's a difference between the data, the facts gathering, which is where multiple voices come in, and then the writing of the final report, which should be in one voice, but that can be read by multiple people with, you know, feedback that goes back to that one voice.
So, in basically adding to what Isabelle has said, I think internal to your school, usually the dean or the head of the unit, in consultation with the director of accreditation or associate dean for accreditation, will kind of make a decision on who will be the internal readers of the whole report once you have a good draft. And in my experience, that is usually myself as the dean or the head of the unit, the associate dean or the director of accreditation, and a couple more associate deans or department heads that I view that have a broad knowledge of the school and could read the report and basically know something about all the key areas required in the report to give feedback. And then at the same time, I think most of the accrediting bodies, the team chair and or their staff liaisons are happy to read and give you input on the report. And particularly specific areas that you have concern about. But I know that in most accrediting bodies, the team chair also, for example, in AACSB, is basically your advisor during the process. So that person is often asked to read the report and give feedback or read sections of the report, as are your staff liaisons with AACSB. So that's an external perspective. Another option obviously is to have a consultant. And I can tell you that I serve as a consultant and work with schools, but in no way could a school ever just give me their information and me write the report. Or I would not do that as a consultant. Maybe some consultants do that, but why would you want to leave a very important piece of what you do as an institution to an outside person? Because the outside person is never going to know as much as you, the internal experts. What would a consultant bring to it is basically just saying, I don't think you put your best foot forward in this section. I think you could basically do some different things. Maybe even by what I read in another section, why didn't you include it here versus where you include it, and things like that. So to me, a consultant, even if you go that way, and it's certainly not required, is going to just help you make the report better in terms of your story, help you tell your story better, help you be better prepared for the on-site visit, and so forth. I also think it's really important, and I'm in a US setting right now where we have a lot of open records and so forth in terms of report, but our intent is to share our AACSB report internally with our faculty and staff about 30 to 45 days, depending upon when we're ready to do it, before it's due to the accrediting body. Because we want the faculty and staff to give their opinion. Now, are they going to sit down and give detailed opinions like an external consultant might? No, but they certainly are going to help us basically tell us if they don't think what we've said is really the case, or, you know, and those are things we want to know, because if you tell your story and your internal stakeholders differ with you on your story, you want to know that now. You don't want to know that during the peer review team visit. When the peer review team asks them questions and they say, well, actually what was said in the report isn't really accurate. So, you know, that's not what you want.
Yeah, no, if I might follow, if I may follow up on this, I think it's important, you know, and I know in Europe it's a bit different than in the US on you know, for sharing of the whole report. But I would encourage schools to share as much as they can, or as much as they decide that they want to, because I think, you know, faculty and staff really appreciate when they see the whole report, and they see also that what they've worked, you know, providing you information is actually come into a nice whole report, and they're not, and it's not hidden from them. So I think, you know, I know sometimes schools well, you know, I'm talking about France here, but, you know, sometimes schools hesitate because of confidentiality, you know, questions, but, you know, you go to, you know, in US schools, it's different. You can find the, you know, the reports online sometimes. But I think it's what I've gathered is that faculty and staff really appreciate the transparency of being able to read the whole report and not feel like they are, you know, less important because, you know, they can't read the whole thing, you know, compared to A, B, or C at the institution. So,
since you both have read a lot of accreditation reports, what are the biggest mistake you have seen in them? Like if you had like, a list of 2 or 3 big mistakes or big things to avoid while writing an accreditation report, what would they be? Geralyn, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think I've read a limited number of accreditation reports that to me are fluff pieces or marketing pieces. They're all about the great things the school does, and which is good, which I want to know, but they don't get to the heart of the guidelines or the requirements for the accrediting body. So they kind of skim over certain key areas that the accrediting body is interested in. And when I get a report like that, that raises all sorts of red flags and lots of different questions about the key pieces, in terms of strategy and strategic management and faculty qualifications and research and issues related to students and student learning and so forth. So if the key pieces for the accrediting body are kind of buried in the marketing or the fluff for the institution, then that raises a red flag for me. The other thing that raises a red flag is if there's too much attention or detail in one section and not enough in the other sections of importance, then of course that raises concern, because I think your challenge is to write the report based upon the qualifications or the requirements for the accrediting body, and to balance it. So if the accrediting body has 3 or 4 pieces of key information or standards, whatever guidelines, you have to balance the writing of the report to give them equal emphasis. And if you spend too much time on one and not another, it kind of raises questions from the reader in general. Isabelle?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's a fine line between, you want to give all the information that you can, but it's a fine line between giving what you need to give or hiding information. And I think sometimes I see schools that are afraid of talking about a struggle that they have, for instance. No school is perfect. There's always room for improvement. I think what sometimes schools tend to do is that they're like, oh, we struggle with this, so we're going to hide this. But it's obvious in the report, and they forget that people that are reading those reports are seasoned deans, and that they will see through that. And I think there is a lot of value in saying, well, we acknowledge, this area of improvement. This is what we've done to work on the issue. If it's if it's a big problem linked to a concern that the school already has, well, then you want to seek, advice with your staff liaison, with the accrediting body or the chair. But I think that's in complement to what Geralyn was saying. I think sometimes you need to own what you want to say about the school, because that's also linked to the next stage, right? The report, as Geralyn mentioned earlier, is the document. Then you have the visit, and you don't want that the chair of the visit or the whole team discovers something the day of the visit. That's not gonna go well if it's like that.
Isabelle, it's related to the question asked by Claire. How do you manage a multiplicity of the same data to provide consistent information without the report itself?
Can you say that again?
You have a lot of examples.
Yeah.
How do you manage the multiplicity of the same data to provide consistent information within the report itself?
Yeah, so I think that comes with, one question we didn't talk about is how long we should take to write the report. And I think that links to that, because this is not something that you can write quickly. This is something you need a couple of months, sometimes, you know, I would say, you know, at least 6 months, depending on the schools, depending on the situation, you know, maybe 6 to 12 months. But I think you work on the coherence of data, you know, with having multiple people looking at it, with having multiple reads, because sometimes, you know, we all know that feeling when you just keep working on the report, and then you get to a point where you just can't see it anymore. You know, you just can't, you know, you need to have a fresh set of eyes. But I think it's, you know, it takes one person as one voice that will, you know, be able to really know the report from A to Z, so that, you know, that person can really look at the coherence of the data. But that it also takes, you know, having time to do this and having time to have other people look at it.
Geralyn, do you want to finish? Because that will be the last question, I think.
Oh.
Well, I will finish with a slightly different take off of that last question then. I think everyone needs to understand that the report is one piece in the accreditation process, and it is a very important and an essential piece. So it is important for you to follow the guidelines of the accrediting body and to basically attend events and get input on best practices of reports and so forth. But it's equally important for you to understand that if there is a peer review team visit, basically that's a different preparation. The report is one piece in the preparation, but that's a different preparation. And I know there's going to be another webinar that's going to deal more with that. But I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the report being a critical piece for the accreditation, but then the preparation for the actual peer review team visit, where the peer review team will basically be looking to validate the information that you've had in the report, but in most cases to go beyond that as well, to expand upon the key points that you have in the report. Because as one of the people asking questions emphasized, reports are limited in terms of pages, and it's a challenge to write. And that's why if you write in the beginning, as I was suggesting, you just write your story. It may take, you may have a 50-page limit, and writing your story takes 120 pages. And you've got a lot of additional detail to share internally before the peer review team.
Well, ladies, it's past our deadline. So thank you so much. Thank you, Geralyn, for waking up so early. Thank you, Isabelle, for taking time. Thank you all for taking time to listen to us today. We are looking forward to have a new session on Wednesday with Kirsten on how to prepare for an accreditation visit. So thank you, Geralyn, for opening the discussion in that direction. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.